welcome to episode 7 for Holy Harlots. This episode is going to be about how people-pleasing is actually killing your divinity. In this podcast, we talk a lot about how women are being called to step into their divine femininity. Even men, we all need a healing for our divine feminine. And in order to do that, it's important to identify where the current limiting blocks are. And people-pleasing is a huge one, along with overgiving and the inability to receive, i.e. hyper-independence. But today, people-pleasing. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and please become a member. There's a link below because these videos are free and ad-free. So thank you for being here. So the cost of being good, how people-pleasing kills the divine woman. You were not meant to be digestible in like it's easy for everyone to get along with you and you're just quiet and nice. In fact, nice for me is such a trigger word right now. It's like I no longer, like my forefront desire is not to be nice. Being nice is easy and it's an energy killer. Being kind, being compassionate, great. But being nice to me sounds like you would sacrifice everything else, a part of yourself, in order to be nice for everyone. Anyways, that's just my current view on it. We're going to be talking about the sacred feminine wisdom behind this, trauma science, and somatic healing. So first, I just kind of want you to hop into your body. And when I ask you, where does people-pleasing live in your body? What does your body say? For me, I can feel it in my throat and in my sinus cavity. And this is just good because the more you start to ask your body these questions, the more answers she will give you, and the more she will trust you. And the more your body trusts you, the more she can lead you intuitively. But you can't get led intuitively if you're constantly sacrificing yourself for others, i.e. people-pleasing. So part 1, people-pleasing is not really about being kind. It's not generosity. It's an energetic distortion and it's a survival tactic. We end up fracturing parts of ourselves off because we think we need to in order to survive and be a part of the group. So this is seen really prevalently in kids who grew up in kind of unsafe environments where they felt like they always had to know what everyone was feeling in order to be safe. Like if I know if anyone's angry, then I can fawn, then I can be smaller, then I can be quieter so that I don't garner their anger. So you can see how people-pleasing was actually a trauma response often. It's often coined as fawn response, especially by Pete Walker, which is kind of a lesser-known trauma response, which involves appeasing other people to avoid conflict, harm, or rejection. And when we do that, we are harming our biochemistry. We are harming our actual physiology. So the vagus nerve, right, which switches our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight, flight, and freeze, to our parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, receive. So this vagus nerve, right, which comes from our craniosacral all the way, wraps around every single organ, and then for women ends at the cervix. So it goes throughout your whole body. It affects the way every part of you runs, from digestion to sleep to energy. And when we activate fawn response over and over again, or people-pleasing response over and over again, we shut down our own needs, which shuts down that vagus nerve switch. We're almost unable to switch from stressed to relaxed as much as we need to be. So we end up staying in that stress response because we're hyper vigilant. We're always on the lookout about how to please other people so that we can be safe. From an adult perspective, it's like we know that we do things for others because we think that if we don't do it for them, they'll be mad at us, or they'll criticize us or reject us, or we're scared of their ire. It's like we know that, but we still do it anyway because it becomes embedded in your fascia, in your cells, in your DNA. That's how you were able to stay safe. Again, from an adult perspective, though, we don't need that any longer. And it's not super difficult to come out of it. It just takes a little bit of practice. People pleasing is not necessarily a personality trait. It's a protective mechanism born of a dysregulated nervous system, especially in women who were taught that love is earned through their obedience. Let's kind of shift out of that. So from a psychological perspective, the people-pleasing is a protective behavior, right? And it's rooted in the belief that who I am is not enough, so I must earn love, safety, or approval by completely abandoning myself. So these balloons, you guys, if anyone knows how to get rid of balloons on these recordings, let me know. But people pleasing is about a worthiness, right? If you grew up and you learned that you were only worthy if you were performative, you were only worthy if you made other people happy, imagine how that affects you as an adult. Let's say you're out in the working world and you're carrying around this burden of people pleasing. You will continue to set other people ahead of yourself, giving them the opportunities that you deserved, telling yourself that you don't deserve certain things or that their happiness matters over you. And over time, what that does is it silences your creativity, it shuts down your sexuality, and it completely, you end up being 30 and you're like, who the hell am I? Because you've abandoned yourself over and over and over again, and then there's almost nothing left. And that's dramatic for sure, but you know what I'm saying. You keep giving parts of yourself away until there's nothing left in your cup, and you're like, wow, I'm really resentful, really angry, and like my life doesn't look the way I wanted to, even though I'm constantly giving to other people. So how did this all start? People pleasing is the root of it is shame-based. So in the most recent episode, Nina and I talked a lot about how shame was developed starting as early as age 2. And that episode didn't reach as many people as I thought it would, but it's also because I think it had the word shame in the title, and nobody wants to talk about shame. Everyone thinks, oh, I don't carry shame, but people are readily to say, oh, I overgive, oh, I'm a people pleaser, oh, I'm avoidant attachment. These are all shame-based ideas. They're just disguised. So the origin story of people pleasing is I am fundamentally unworthy unless I perform for others. So you overgive, you over apologize, you silence yourself. And all of this, right, is like throat related, constantly giving to others, silencing yourself. And we know what the throat is directly connected to. Your womb space, your uterus, your vaginal canal. So when we tighten up that fascia learns that it's not safe. It does so, its womb and throat both start to constrict and become weaker over time. On some level, people pleasers fear that just being themselves, the raw, honest, messy part of themselves, is what makes them unlovable or actually unsafe. So we use people pleasing as a way to avoid rejection, to avoid conflict, and to feel temporarily good enough. But none of that comes from within us. So as soon as we don't have the approval of that person that we self-sacrificed for, we're left with ourself, which was, that cup was never full. So if you find yourself when you're alone being like, who am I? What am I doing? Am I doing enough? Or you're constantly criticizing, that might be that empty cup feeling of having given so much to everyone. And then when you're finally alone, being like, wow, nothing was given back. It costs. People pleasing costs you your authenticity, your own self-trust, and your vital energy. So from a spiritual and somatic perspective, shame will cut you off from the divine within, because we talk a lot about in this channel how we are the temple for the divine to come through. So therefore, however we treat our temple is actually how we worship spirit, God, goddess. So imagine that. This self-criticism, this self-abandonment is actually how you're communicating with spirit. And that's what really gets me. When I sacrifice my own needs for other people, which I hardly do anymore, but when I have done it, I've been left feeling so empty. And it was really a kick in the pants to be like, oh my God, this is how I treat the God within. That's what really motivated me to be like, no, I really need to be treating myself with devotion, filling myself up with so much devotion and worship that it outpours from me. We don't outpour from the temple first. So these shame-based responses like people-pleasing and over-giving, it completely collapses the throat chakra, right? You see this as thyroid problems, as neck tension, as kind of that ball in your throat when you get emotional of just walled up emotions that haven't been able to be spoken. And it freezes your womb space. And your womb space, right, directly connected to the cosmos, it can create anything and everything, literally and actually. That also gets frozen in place because you're not allowing yourself to be creatively fulled up. You've stopped the devotional practice of worshiping yourself, and you've chosen to worship others and haven't really received what you needed out of it. And it also creates fragments of self, would be the psychological term, or soul fragments in shamanic terms. When you fracture yourself over and over and over again, and you say, that part of me is not worthy of the light, nobody wants to know how messy I am, nobody wants to know how difficult, this or that was, nobody wants to hear how well I'm doing. When you completely fracture and fracture and fracture because you're only trying to present this very pleasing part of yourself, you become less and less and less. And that's when you look at your life and you're like, whoa, am I actually living the life I want to lead? People pleasing is how your inner child tries to protect itself by keeping you small, right? Because it's that learned behavior of like, if I'm small and everyone else is happy, then I'm safe. And I just really invite you to be like, okay, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. How, whatever that looks like, I welcome the dissolvement of that old pattern and belief system. In Holy Harlot, the whole program is teaching you that divinity is not conditional. You are not here to please other people. You are here to radiate so thoroughly from within that light gets to touch and heal others, creating actual miracles. And no one needs you to be perfect. I think the biggest thing I've learned for myself in the past month, and I've talked about this on this channel before, is like I have this archetype that gets played often for me, which is the healer. So I bring that. It's gotten so strong within me that even when I don't need to be on, right, I still present as like, everything's perfect, how can I help? And I've had this amazing opportunity to go to San Diego and spend time with 2 of my clients. And then I got invited to the Dominican Republic to do a private retreat with 2 of my clients. And all 4 of these women ended up being very close friends of mine at the end of both trips. And all 4 of them were like, hey, Mary Lisa, we don't want the perfect you. We want the you. We want the messy, the silly, the angry, the wild, the jealous, the chaotic. And it took some time for me to really accept that bringing those vulnerabilities to light with people who I was, thought were just clients really created such deep relationships. I mean, these women saw me cry. They saw me have freakouts. And from a professional perspective, that doesn't sound good, right? I remember when I was being trained as a mental health counselor, one of the biggest things that they said is like, don't overly connect with the clients, right? Keep it clean. And so I've carried that with me for like 15 years. And now I'm realizing what a crock of shit. I tell my clients, I love you. I hope you're doing well. You're amazing. And oh yeah, yesterday, I was so mad. And like this realness that has really started to shine through in this online presence that I have has blessed me in miracle ways. Like I said, those 4 amazing friendships that I now have, in other women reaching out to me, asking me to travel internationally for them with private retreats, me shining a light on the parts of me that I thought just needed to be in the shadow has created a wealth of opportunity, friendships, and finances for me. So I hope you get to have the same experience. I hope you get to show the parts of you and be so thoroughly loved for them. All of that goes to say, when I showed up in those 2 instances for clients as being the healer, it was really people-pleasing in disguise, which we now know is shame in disguise. I didn't want them to see the whole Mary Lisa. And what people-pleasing says is, I'll do what you want so I don't feel the shame of not being approved of or liked or worthy. But the sacred woman says, I will honor my truth even if it disappoints you, because the divine is pleased by my integrity, not my sacrifice. And coincidentally, other people will be more pleased. So part 2, how people-pleasing fractures your power. So chronic self-abandonment really disorients your intuition and fractures your magnetism. You become less magnetic the more you abandon yourself. You can't be magnetic while leaking energy to perform or show people that you're worthy of their attention. Growing up, I had 2 amazing parents who, really protected me. And after coming out of childhood, I realized that what was happening was I had learned to not trust myself. I had learned to trust other people's voice over my voice. I had learned that I needed other people's approval before I made a decision. And so it took me years to be like, no, it's what I say goes. I'm connected to the God, the goddess within, and I have to rebuild that trust of asking, what does Mary Lisa want? What pleases Mary Lisa? Because a lot of what I do today in my life, no one approved of at first. There's always going to be someone that says, that sounds dangerous. How could that ever work out? Or it doesn't work that way. That's their life, right? But we don't get to where we're going by listening to other people, no matter how well-intentioned they are. You have the divinity and the codes within you. And when you ask yourself, what do I want out of each situation? You start to build that trust within yourself, which again is building intuition, which again is how you'll get guided by magic and synchronicity to everything that's in your vortex that you've been asking for. So let's talk a little bit more about the science behind people pleasing. So polyvagal theory by Stephen Porges. Remember, the vagus nerve wraps around everything, and it regulates your sympathetic to your parasympathetic nervous system. When you suppress your truth and abandon your needs, you basically become a conditioned animal. Your nervous system enters a freeze or a fawn state, which prevents self-expression and encourages numbness. So if you struggle with numbness or even just understanding what you want, maybe you're starting from a place of, I don't even know what I want. That's actually an issue with the nervous system. You've been frozen for so long that it's going to take some gentle rewiring through embodiment so that you can start to understand what you do want. It's also about cortisol or overload. So constantly trying to manage other people's emotions. My therapist called it hypervigilance, right? You're constantly on, it's kind of like soldier syndrome. Like you're looking for where's the next danger at. So your system's always high on cortisol, which weakens your immune system, lowers your libido, and disrupts your emotional regulation. It makes it harder for you to feel the good feelings. So studies show that suppressing those emotions so that you can be on hyper alert all the time, right? You start storing emotions instead of feeling them. It actually increases the activity in your amygdala. And your amygdala inside the brain is your fear center. So the more you're hypervigilant and the more you store your emotions rather than you feel them, the more fear you create because it gets practiced. And so that part of your brain develops larger. So this also reduces your memory and decision making. But don't worry, the brain is very plastic and it can be nourished to grow in other areas, which is the whole process of Holy Harlots. It's about making your pleasure center bigger and allowing the other parts of your brain to rest and downregulate. So every time you override your truth in order to be liked by others, you train your body to feel unsafe. Okay? And the more you train your body to feel unsafe, the more you create circumstances for you to find where it is unsafe. It's that whole reticular activating loop. When you convince your reticular activating system through repetition that the world is unsafe and people don't like me and I am unworthy, your reticular activating system says, those are what I'm looking for. I'm looking for reasons I'm unsafe, reasons people don't like me, and reasons I'm unworthy. So it's like your whole system gets wired to this fear response. Your whole system gets wired to people pleasing. So I hope this is encouraging to say that the life that you've created based on the chemistry that you're currently running in your body, it can be readjusted. It takes time and it takes your dedication. But in order to rewire your system, you have to choose something different. And that something different that I hope you'll be choosing, maybe because you're watching these videos, is pleasure. I'm not talking about just sexual pleasure. One of the clients I have right now, we've kind of reframed that word for her because it was kind of triggering. That pleasure is just like what pleased you, what pleases you, what do you enjoy. So maybe that word is a little bit easier for you to use. So why are women especially prone to people pleasing? So grandma, right, holds the biological elements of mom and you inside of her even before mom or you are born. We get carried in the lineages two generations before us. So we carry memories even further past that in our bioluminescence, which creates our DNA, of witch burnings, of exile for being intuitive or healers, of punishment for connecting and channeling God or goddess, for basically just being too much or too loud. So being nice has become a survival tactic for women. If I'm nice, then they won't exile me. If I'm nice, then maybe I'll get to lead a mediocre life without being harassed. This still comes through for me sometimes when I am talking to a man that gets overly emotional. Like if someone becomes really mad and really aggravated, I go into fawn. I'm like, it's okay, everything's fine. When when the appropriate response would be like, hey, you're having quite a strong emotional reaction, and I don't need to dim my light when someone else is being overly emotional, but I do it because I fear that an overly emotional man can become physically dangerous. And that's something that I'm, come a long way from, but it's just like such a wild thing to notice. Like, wow, I really got small in that moment because I feared for my physical safety. Bioluminescent, it lives ancestrally within us. So epigenetics, right? It's talking about how trauma can pass through generations via the gene expression. So daughters of women who experienced intense social suppression, colonialism, misogyny, or religious, often carry that writing without knowing it. So think of your female ancestors, grandmas, nanas, great-great-grandmas. Do you think that they were trying to just survive, or were they trying to thrive? Do they even have the abilities to vote or to finance their life? And these can be kind of tricky questions, because it's not to say that they lived a bad life or a horrible life. We have many happy ancestors, but it's just about understanding how things can get passed to us that we didn't necessarily just fully experience in this life by ourselves. Also, girls are constantly rewarded for caretaking and emotional labor, while boys are rewarded for leadership and self-assertion. So here's what's happening in real life when you say yes when you want to say no, and why you're collecting all of these emotional imprints that are preventing you from actually leading the life full of everything you've been trying to manifest. So let's say that you agree to go to brunch, you take on extra work, and you're listening to your friend venting again, even though you're tired or irritated. You smile through it because you're trying to be kind. You're trying to show up for people, because that's what we've been trained as women to do. Show up, give, pour out from yourself. But underneath it, your body is screaming. You've got tight shoulders, anxiety preventing you taking a full breath in your chest, and you've got numbness and resentment building up in your womb and your yoni. Every time you override your own needs, it teaches your nervous system that your truth is dangerous. It becomes a feedback loop. So you're actively training yourself to give up on yourself, and it's contracting your biology, your physiology, and then your body listens and creates more of that. I had a friend once where she was in a really emotional state, and I realized she was coming to me and like venting and outpouring, and in that moment I couldn't, like, my body felt like it was going to crawl out of its skin. And so people pleasing told me just stay quiet and listen to her and let her vomit and purge and get this out. But what my body needed in that moment was for me to stick up for myself and be like, hey, I can tell you're in a really delicate space right now. I don't have the capacity to hold that for you. And what she did is she immediately snapped out of it and was like, okay, thanks for letting me know. I'm a big on verbal consent, not for obviously sexual acts, but like emotional consent. Do you have time and space for me right now? When a friend comes to me and they are venting, I'm like, do you want solution or do you want hand holding? Right? Because this honors both parties with that clear communication. Another symptom of people pleasing is that you over explain yourself. You feel like you need permission in order to have feelings and boundaries. Let's say that you have to cancel on plans with someone, but then you feel the need to like launch into like a 10 paragraph text message about why and how you wish you could be there. What that is not, it's an injustice to your own feelings. The people around you, right? Hopefully you have people that love and support you and offer you grace. And even if you don't right now, stop setting up the expectation that you're always available, or stop setting up the expectation that you're always good to go, right? Sometimes the biggest way to break out of people pleasing is to start asking for other people to hold space for you. That's my favorite thing to do. I'll text a friend and be like, hey, can I have 2 compliments right now? Because opening up this clear communication creates such juicy relationships. And if you're a people pleaser carrying the burden for other people, I guarantee you they really want to know how you genuinely feel about what you genuinely need. It makes them feel like they're able to help you as well. The divine woman does not over-explain herself because she understands that her sacred boundaries are just that. They're sacred. It's for the spirit within. And being firm is not being mean. It's an honor for both you and the other person. It creates healthy expectations and vulnerability as well. So another symptom of people pleasing is that you hold back your opinions. In meetings and relationships or on social media, you bite your tongue because you don't want to seem rude or too intense or difficult. And there is something to be said about honoring how you're feeling in that moment without making it about other people. When you start to discuss your true feelings out loud, it may feel like you're being naughty. It may feel like, oh my God, are they going to reject me? Or what if I'm wrong? One of my biggest problems in like stepping out into this social media light and like getting the Spirit Collective Holy Harlot name out there was I was scared of being wrong. I was scared that someone was going to come in and be like, that's incorrect. And believe me, I get those kind of messages all the time. In fact, a man commented on one of my posts about divine femininity recently, and he was like, sounds like pure delusion and lip filler. At this point in my life, it gives me the giggles, but like I was at a place where that would have crushed my spirit. But I've had enough practice now to be like, someone else's opinion of me does not shine a light on me. It shines a light on them. Right? So I don't allow my creative fire to be doused by someone else's like wet blanket syndrome. I value the health of my body and my spirit so much that I allow myself to be wrong. I was on a discovery call with a woman today who she's like, I love your content, but it also scares me because I grew up in the church and I really still do believe in Jesus Christ. And I'm like, yes, Jesus Christ was a great man, and this is how it fits into the program. He was showing people what's possible as a human. He really was a blessing. And she's like, I'm just scared of being wrong. And I was like, oh, I see you. Because on my intuitive energetic healing journey, which has been over 10 years now, it's an evolution. If you go back to Mary Lisa in 2015, who had just learned Reiki, to 2025 Mary Lisa, who, has an international business, like I was doing things back then that I would not be doing today. That doesn't mean I was wrong. I was still working with and developing, and I'm still working with and developing. And I promise you, I'm going to say things now that I'm going to look back on and be like, I further developed from that. Don't be scared of being wrong. Just dust it off. There is no wrong. It's just about how you feel in that moment. And every feeling is a guide from your higher self. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit further. Every feeling is a guide from your higher self. So when you hold back that feeling of like, I need to say something, or I need to go do this, or I don't want to do that, right? That's a sign from higher self. Now, we don't want to get too far into it where we're blocking ourselves, thinking that our anxiety is our intuition, because it's not. It's just your nervous system trying to prevent you from growing larger. Anyways, the whole truth of the matter is your emotions are your guides, right? And it's not up to you to manage people's reactions. It is so liberating to live so thoroughly for you that other people's reactions hold no bar to how you experience life. I would say I'm maybe 85% there. Every once in a while, someone will say something and I'm like, damn, oopsies, that didn't feel great. But I'm getting so thoroughly alive by following my pleasure and my passion. And if you follow any of Bashar, Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar, he's like, if you ever feel off path, just ask yourself, what would bring me pleasure right now? And then keep taking a step forward in pleasure, in pleasure, in pleasure. Why? Because those steps towards pleasure is what hopscotches you along to your divine purpose. You won't know what's at the end of this path because you're not meant to. You're meant to enjoy yourself along the path. Right? And you can't enjoy yourself along the path if you're trying to drive through someone else's path because you're constantly trying to make them feel okay. Stop filtering yourself. So, if you guys, another thing that's limiting the people pleaser, what was her name? Gillian Flynn wrote the book Gone Girl, and then it became a movie. And the main character, ended up being some sort of sociopath, right? Hope I'm not giving everything away. But it was so interesting because she was like, I was always trying to be the guy's girl, the cool girl, she called herself. And that just like in the early 2000s so resonated because there was so much of like women, including myself, putting them out there to be like, look, I'm chill. I'm cool. Yeah, let's go drink beer and like watch football. And oh, it doesn't matter. I don't want flowers or be taken to dinner or whatever, right? It's this cool, I'm chill. That is killing your divinity. Women are meant to be worshipped fully. You have to worship yourself as well. Anyways, that's a little off topic, but when you tell yourself it's no big deal, when you spiritually bypass your annoyance, your rage, and your frustration, you're not like moving past them, you're avoiding them and storing that anger, resentment, and frustration inside your body. A lot of people get stuck here because they're like, well, I don't want to feel it or say that I'm angry because then I'll manifest more of it. That's not true. Your emotions are your guide. You can't stuff them. So if you're feeling frustration, you acknowledge it and then you move on. If you're feeling angry, you express it like a baby. That made me angry. And now I'm good. Right? Emotions are energy and they need to be in motion. Because these microaggressions against yourself will add up until you're a stiff person being like, there's no pleasure or joy. What is this, you guys? What is this nonsense? Quick time player, my booty. Okay. Being chill becomes a mask that hides your needs, your preferences, and your powers. And when your inner world doesn't match your outer behavior, that's when you fracture self-trust. That's when you start to disintegrate from your body and your body becomes in disharmony and dis-ease. Also, if you feel like you're constantly exhausted and you don't know why, it's because you're burning energy constantly trying to adjust the emotions of everyone else in the room. Do they like me? Was that okay to say? Should I have phrased that differently? Are they still thinking about it? Because I am. You're living in a low-level performance 24/7, which is just all the energy you generate, you just zap it away from you. That's not divinity, that's survival. And so we want you to be rooted in your body, knowing it in every moment what feels best and most in alignment with the good for you and the good for all. And what's good for all is what's good for you. Guaranteed. So another sign of people pleasing is you become resentful in relationships, even though you never ask for too much. That's the problem. You're never asking for anything. So when you don't ask for something, I mean, your partner probably isn't a mind reader, your friends aren't a mind reader, your boss isn't a mind reader, you know? So you expect people to show up for you, and then when they don't, you create resentment, which is actually just playing the victim. I was on another discovery call this morning where we were talking about how in relationships, sometimes we set up traps for people so that they fall in and we're like, oh, yes, now I get to be the victim. They fell for it. That's kind of what that is, because never asking for anything, what did the martyr get? Nothing. And so when you start asking for things and you require the worship that it takes to be a divine feminine being, you will be so surprised about how much your partner feeds off of the pleasure that you create from within. It's hard when you're in an existing relationship to kind of see how anything can change by asking for more, but it actually brings so much more pleasure, so much more enlightenment, so much more happiness and peace when your partner knows with clarity what you need. And not just a partner, but in all relationships. When you start getting your cup filled, right, it shines like the sun out, blessing everyone. Promise you that. So in short, people-pleasing may seem harmless, but it adds up. It teaches your system to suppress, shrink, and self-abandon. And when you live from that place, the divine cannot move through you. You cannot magnetize what you want because you're a fractured self. But it's easy to move out of through small acts of pleasure. Let's talk about how we can reclaim the unapologetic feminine energy within us. So if you are a temple or a church for which spirit comes through, and every moment is a prayer, every devotional act is straight to worship for spirit, then your boundaries are doors. No one gets to kick through the doors of a church. How disrespectful, right? So I want you to think of boundaries as like a sacred invitation. You get to decide whether that door is opened and someone may come through, or the door stays shut and you send out the sentries. It's important to have doors and borders and boundaries to let people know your expectation of how you are, of how you want to be treated. I am so good at communicating what I want, and I historically have been, and there have been moments where I've set a boundary or I've said something like, hey, the way that was just handled, it wasn't right for me. Let me explain why and like see what you think about it. That's always come pretty natural for me. And I will tell you that it shocks some people. But even when people get shocked, it gives them an opportunity to meet me, because there is nothing more potent than clarity. Everyone's craving clarity in relationships, friendships, the workplace. The more clear you can be, the more people trust you. I feel like I have the relationships I have, and I have such trusting friends because I show up clearly all the time. And yeah, sometimes they're like, wow, Marilisa, again with the like, oh, you've set a boundary and we get it. But I really think and know that they value how clear and how present I am because of my abilities to set boundaries. So your voice is a medicine, not only for you, but for your ancestors. For every time they didn't get to say no, anytime that they had to say yes or stuff their own voice, you don't need to do that anymore. Your pleasure is a divine intelligence that moves through your body, guiding you to make actual miracles in this life. So, practices like breath work, vocal expression, and somatic movement can actually rewire that nervous system, allowing new patterns of safety and power to take root. So, for example, I just finished recording one of the modules on reclaiming sacred shame and rage. And not a super fun topic to talk about, but it's one of the most important, because so often when I tune into someone's throat, there's rage there. So often when I tune into someone's heart, there's anger and shame there. And they don't kind of just poof go away if we ignore them. They need to be moved through by vibration, sound, or movement. That's why things like biofield tuning work. That's why things like dancing work. See, no one's asking you to go back and like talk about the most shameful experience you've ever had, but it takes something very simple like moaning it out, dancing it out. How simple. What if I told you all the stored shame and anger that's causing high cortisol levels, that's causing you to always think negatively, that's blocking all your magnetism, could be gone just by through dance, movement, and sound? Because that's essentially what we're saying here. That's how you repattern the nervous system without diving through hours and hours of talk therapy. So chanting, humming, moaning, they all stimulate the vagus nerve and help activate the ventral vagal state, which is a state of openness, safety, and magnetism. So again, we're talking about how to relax the vagus nerve so that you can relax literally every other organ in your body. If you've ever had a session with me and you notice that you're yawning or you get the chills or, you feel your body start to tingle, that's what that feels like when your vagus nerve starts to relax, because it's letting go of all the tension in your body. That's how we create that state over and over again. And that's why things like biofield tuning work, because it stimulates a large influx of nitric oxide, triggering that ventral vagal state. So the HeartMath Institute says when you live in alignment with your truth, whatever your truth be for that moment, that day, which can change a lot, your heart and brain enter a state of coherence. And coherence actually boosts intuition, clarity, and magnetism. The reason why bodily coherence is important is because think of it as like homeostasis. Think of it as expansion and receptivity. If you're constantly in stress and hyper-awareness and people-pleasing, you will be incoherent, which blocks all those gifts that you know are yours by divine right. So from today, I want you to think of people-pleasing as like blasphemy to your pleasure and your intuition. I want you to think of people-pleasing as an injury to the relationships around you. Imagine having relationships where those people never even knew who you were or what you were truly feeling. That's an injustice to them and to you. You have something so amazing underneath all of these blockages that is just waiting to shine. And the more authentic, the more real, the more you cry out of nowhere, the more you laugh out of nowhere, the more you discover yourself, the more others can discover you. So let people discover you. I've had lots of breakups. I'm a serial dater. And whenever I get scared of like having to do the breakup, I just remember that generally we don't give people enough emotional credit to react in positive ways. I remember this guy came over one time. It was like one day I invited him to my Halloween party with all my friends, and he made an absolute fool out of himself, drank too much, was being really, really crazy, and I sent him home. And the next day he was like, let me take you out. And I told him, I was like, look, I don't think it's a match for, I was nervous to let him down. It's never a fun thing. And after I sent that, he was like, thanks for letting me know. I appreciate your honesty. It's just like, I could have been a people pleaser and shown up to the date and like hated it and just like hoped he had a great time. But in reality, that's an injustice to us both. So behind your people pleasing is actually a healer. And to get to that healer, that lover, that generous, fun haver, you need to show up as your full self, because your full self is what everyone is waiting for, whether they know it or not. So the divine cannot come through a contorted vessel where you don't know yourself. Your truth is holy. Start to discover it. Ask yourself in every moment, is this what pleases me? Do I want this? Can I be radically honest with this person and say, I just don't know if I can do that today? Let that be your practice. So if you're ready to explore more of what Holy Harlot has to offer into your life and go deeper into your womb wisdom and your divine feminine embodiment, then just leave a comment devoted below on this, and I will send you over the process. Again, thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to worship your beautiful